Hello, most awesome one. Welcome back to another episode of the Switch Pivot or Quit podcast. I am your host, Ayana Angel, and this is the space to listen in closely to when you're asking yourself the question of what's next. We speak to the professionals, the experts, the people who have been there and done that to try and get you the insights and tangible takeaways that you can utilize in your day to day as you're trying to navigate your professional journey. And also, we look at the personal side of things too, right? Because you can't have the professional side without the personal side. And today we're going to be speaking to Whitney Ferris, who is an executive coach. She deals with leaders, she guides them, she works with them so that they can be the best leader that they can possibly be. And she's able to do that because she has over 2 decades of corporate experience. And so she's able to guide them in ways that feel very firsthand knowledge experience. And I'm excited for you to be able to listen in to what Whitney has to share, because guess what? We all need a little guidance here and there, and she has some great tips for us. So without further ado, let's get into it. You're a high achieving executive turned coach. What brought on that shift in sort of like your direction?
It kind of was a combination of two things. One, I've always had a passion for helping people. I had some great mentors early in my career, and I have always looked back at those mentors and thought I would not be there without them. So it's essentially a commitment to myself to be able to pay that forward. And coaching was one avenue of doing that. But also, I found that as I grew in my career as a female and then becoming a working mom, a lot of people were seeking me out for guidance on their career decisions, how to create more balance, if that actually exists. And I finally said, how do I get myself best prepared to support these individuals reaching out? And coaching was really an answer to both of those desires for me. And that's how I decided to make the investment in entering coach training programs.
So in a world where job hopping is the norm, especially now, especially to try and get to that larger salary and those maybe sometimes grander opportunities, you spent 16 years at one company. You worked from sales to chief of staff to CFO. What was the catalyst that inspired you to make these internal pivots rather than leaving that said company?
I've had a very non-traditional career path, but I'm super proud of it, to be honest with you, because it took a lot of courage in getting outside my comfort zone. So, here's essentially the summary of that. I was in sales and I love sales. There was nothing wrong with it, but I got to a point where I was thinking, what do I want to do in 10 years? And is just climbing the ladder vertically going to give me the skills and experiences to bring the most value? I had some questions about that. I knew I wanted to be an executive and lead at a higher level. And I thought, how do I go understand the other side of the business? And that was really the catalyst for my switch from corporate sales to the internal side of the business, which was operations. And it was there I got the opportunity to work alongside who is now my greatest mentor in my career to build a new corporate function. And I realized so many things about myself. I loved learning new things. I loved stretching my skills. And that was very fulfilling to me and also was preparing me for my long-term career journey. But what I also learned in that first pivot was that I really wanted more work around the development of people. I'm a big believer that you got to do the work that you love and you got to be intentional about the moves that you make, but you don't always see a clear end game to that pivot or that switch. And it was just through doing the work and launching coaching alongside that commercial ops job that then the job that I really wanted opened up, leading an org health function and serving as the chief of staff to the CFO. And so, intentional moves, but definitely not on my career plan when I was much younger.
So it sounds like you launched your side endeavors at the same time as scaling the corporate ladder. Is that accurate?
Not exactly. So when I entered a coach training program, I needed to get coaching hours to get my credential, my certification. And so I came to my company and I said, here's the need that I see in the organization. And here's what that was, is that I believe that so much of development, we treat the symptoms on the surface. Someone has communication issues. We're trying to teach them how to communicate better. We're not treating what's driving that behavior. And one of the great things about coaching is it creates this confidential space for people to really work on the hard stuff. And so I went to my organization and I said, listen, I'd love to donate my hours back to the company, launch this internal coaching program, and do my job that I'm paid to do. And my leader and my leader's leader supported that. And that's how I got my start in coaching. It wasn't until many years later where I said, okay, my next adventure is going to be my own company, that I started my external coaching practice while I was scaling the corporate ladder.
Ooh, okay, so this is good. So it sounds like you were drawn to coaching to help better the employees that were around you. And you said, hey, I'll do this in service of the company. I've heard people looking for coaches and their company is going to pay for it. And they kind of stop right there. They get stuck. They're like, what should I even be looking for in a coach? Like, how is a coach really going to serve me? How should I be looking for this coach to serve me? So looking at it through that lens where you were internal and developing a coaching program, if you will, how would you suggest someone look at the journey of finding a coach, whether it be internal or external?
Well, it first starts with your ability to connect with that person. So it's perfectly okay when you're on the journey to have a couple introductory calls with different coaches and understand what is their style and approach to coaching and how does that land with you. And so, a lot of people are hiring me because they want a combination of my coaching expertise as well as my business experience. And so I'm very clear. I'm a very balanced coach in the sense I'm going to ask you questions, but when you're leaning on me for some ideas or some places to look, I'm happy to insert those in so that you can keep thinking and discovering as an individual. And so, you first have to feel that sense of trust, that click, the click that you feel anytime you connect with someone to go, okay, I want to do this work with the person, and then understand how their coaching approach aligns with what you want to accomplish. And I would say the biggest mistake people make when finding a coach is that they aren't clear at the start what they want to accomplish. And, for me, I always get that very clear before someone is willing to enter a coaching agreement with me, because my biggest nightmare is that they don't get value because we weren't aligned up front. And then I'm like, that's not my expertise. I could have sent you to somebody who focuses on that specific issue, right? So the biggest thing is understanding what you want to accomplish and really asking yourself the question, am I ready to consider change? Because coaching isn't about just a lot of change for you. A lot of times it's clarity, it's a lot of things, but there's a readiness piece that you have to say, I'm all in on this experience. If it means taking a hard look at myself, changing some of the ways that I operate, or whatever that may be. And you just, based on your goals, it's a really unique journey to what your objectives are.
Let's talk about being underestimated for a minute.
Okay.
I feel like I can relate to that. It's sort of like the underdog story, right? Where it's just like, okay, count me out if you want to. And you've talked about being underestimated throughout your career. Can you share what that looked like how you felt or how you knew that you were being underestimated, and then how that in turn shaped your approach to leadership moving forward?
The first time I really felt underestimated was probably my second job. And I was just one of the youngest people and one of the few females in the room in a very high stakes capital sales role. You could see people kind of looked at you like, how are you here? I'm like 24 years old. So many of the people were in their 30s. And like I said, there were two women besides me. So that's a story that repeats itself many times in my career. Just little comments that were made and, hey, good luck, let's see how you do, that let you know that people weren't sure that you belonged. And for me, I think we all get confronted with things that rub us the wrong way, comments that we don't like, that we don't appreciate, that aren't true. And I think we all have a choice. We can let that drag us down or we can let it motivate us. And for me, I thought to myself, the best way to prove them wrong is to be the person standing on that stage winning the award, the name on the top of the list for sales performance. And, it maybe drove me a little too hard at times where my balance was out of whack. But it's not just about me. It's about representing other people that are like me. And to me, that's a responsibility that we all have, is to represent in the best way possible. Not just the results, but in how we do it and how we show up.
Talk to me about a time, like middle of your journey, when you're climbing and you're pivoting. Did you feel like any type of pressure? And if so, what did you do to work through that pressure, or to, I don't know, maybe not work through it? I don't know. How did that unfold?
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, when I pivoted from my role in sales to commercial operations, we were launching this new function. And essentially the company was like, we need you to create these new solutions for our customers to acquire technology. I mean, we think there's a need, but we don't know if it'll work. Go do it. Well, at the time, I had left a very successful sales career. People were baffled. Like, why would you get out of your upward track to go do this? I made less money to make this pivot, but I saw a long-term goal. But there was a lot of pressure. What I stepped in to do, I had never done. I didn't even have the expertise of capital equipment leasing or the deep knowledge of finance that I needed in the role. And they knew that. And I told them that. But they said, hey, here's why we're hiring you for this role. And here's what we can teach you. We believe in you, you in. And I'm like, yes. But it was a lot of pressure because I thought to myself, I mean, this could be the biggest mistake of my career, or it could be one of the most rewarding, fulfilling things that I've done. And it was definitely the latter. But the toughest thing was, once I made the decision and I started in the role, I realized how much I didn't know. And every day I was in my head about, why did I make this move? Was this the right decision? Am I going to show up credible on this call? Is my lack of subject matter expertise going to affect the success of this function? And there was just a tremendous amount of pressure. And on top of that, I had a 1-year-old child. My husband worked, but I was at the time the primary breadwinner. And so it felt like from every angle, there was just a lot pulling on me. And I think in those moments, you have to go back to the things that you can control. And so I knew the things that I could do to accelerate my subject matter expertise, to show up prepared on the calls, to bring value to my customers. And I had to silence a lot of the other noise that was, getting myself in my own head, because I knew I had a track record of success. I had learned hard things before and been successful. The other thing is just trusting yourself in the process. I went back to, when are the times that I've had to be outside of my comfort zone doing something I'd never done? What made me successful? Okay, am I doing those things? Yes or no? If no, how do I do them? If yes, trust. Trust that you have this. Be okay in the discomfort and the uncertainty. And it doesn't make it easy, but I think every day you have to be able to calibrate with yourself. I'm doing all that I can do. So you got to trust the process and the people around you as well.
You got to trust the process. Throughout your experience, you've been able to come up with this framework, the excellence equation. And I want to talk a bit about that. It's an 8-step framework, right?
Yep.
And I would love to hear sort of like what caused you to create and develop this method. Like, what was your thinking behind it? And what do you hope people will get on the other side of working through this method?
Yeah. So there were 2 major drivers for me in creating the excellence equation. And the first was, I think way too often we stop short on ourselves because we lack the belief to just trust that we can get to the other side of that really big goal. How do we give people a reproducible process to follow, to take the really big career goal or personal goal and know how to work through it in a way that has worked for many other people? So the first is it being able to offset that self-doubt with a support system of tools and resources. The second thing is that I believe we stop short on ourselves, not because our lack of ability, but because of our inability to navigate the uncertainty. Uncertainty is so hard, right? We want to know when we make the decision, the career change, it's going to work. It's going to be okay. We're going to like the company. We're going to like the job. That's not life. So many things require us to take steps forward despite the uncertainty. And so what this 8-step process does, it takes you from the starting spot where you're getting anchored in what matters to you so that in times of difficulty, you're grounded in why it matters and you can push forward all the way through building the roadmap for the skills and the resources you need to be successful, surrounding yourself with all the people that are going to help you along this journey, knowing how to flip the switch of turning on your best self and your most confident self to deliver all the way through the reflection phase of that. And the goal is that you have all the steps that you need. And we also work on how you manage yourself in the process. Because the number one derailer in my experience is we get in our own way. And the good news is we can fix that. And this 8-step process will help you do that so that you can tackle big goals with confidence and with a process that is proven to work.
Would you say that getting in our own way is the biggest thing you've seen professionals struggle with?
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere, right? It's like we can be this high performer and then all of a sudden we get tapped to go into this big meeting and we're going, I like to prepare, but I didn't get a chance to prepare for this. And so we sit there silent and we bring no value. That's a missed opportunity. We're in our own way, right? To times where all of a sudden we get that big job and all we can think about is the self-doubt and comparing ourselves to all the people that look better at the job than we do. And so I think one of the things that so many people do is we manage the business or whatever our job is. We manage the people if we're people leaders. We manage our business partners, but we don't manage ourselves, which is how do we show up? How do we contribute? The value that we bring in really having this rock solid mindset so that we are set up for success in whatever situation that we walk into.
I'd
Yeah.
love to hear from you, your experience on the ground, out there working with leaders. What are you hearing them say? How can we make them more relatable to the everyday person? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I help leaders with is really defining who they are as a leader. And that sounds like how do you not know who you are? We all have our values in our life, and a lot of those translate over to work. But there are intentional values and principles that we need to follow as a leader. And we don't know what those are unless we take time to define those. And so I encourage people to think about, there's really kind of 5 things that they think about. What are my strengths? What's the value that I bring to people as a leader? You want to know that and be able to define it, right? Also, what are my weaknesses? And most importantly, the things that could cause me to show up inauthentically, because we all have those things that kind of trigger us and we don't show up exactly the way that we want to. I encourage leaders to think about, what do they want their legacy to be? When someone who reports to them now is 10 years down the road onto their 3rd or 4th leader from now, this leader impacted me in this way, right? And then I ask them to think about, what do I want to represent as a leader? When someone on my team is talking to somebody else and they say, what is it like to work for Whitney? What are those things? And then how do you bundle all of that knowledge that you just kind of created into, let's call it 6 to 8 core principles. And that's what you're going to hold yourself to. And that's what you're going to communicate to your team and your business partners as to what they can hold you accountable to. And it's kind of your checks and balances for how you lead. And it sounds really simple, but I think too often new leaders are pulled in a lot of directions. Who does my leader want me to be? My boss. What does my team need from me? How do I make sure that they like me? What does the business need from me? And they lose themselves. And guess what? They were hired because the company liked them and thought that they were a great fit for this, but they lose themselves. And so how do we help leaders define who they are, how they want to show up and lead? And that's a big part of my work.
Would you say that someone should start working on, if they know they want to be a leader, they should start working on answering some of these questions and identifying sort of this roadmap for themselves way before getting to the space of being a leader?
Absolutely. I mean, I share that activity that I actually teach it in some of my development programs that I lead for companies. I teach that activity of defining your leadership identity and your leadership principles for anybody, even if you're not a leader. Because guess what? Leadership doesn't start with a title. And that's the thing that honestly most aspiring people leaders get wrong. Leadership starts by influencing every single day in a way that drives results and also raises the bar for the people around you. That's a true leader. So we all can lead no matter what our title is, and it will influence our brand, influence our results, and in who we are in the organization. And so defining your leadership principles and your identity is core for anyone. The other thing I'd say that's really important around aspiring people leaders is know why you want to be a people leader. I see a lot of individuals that, well, I was tapped for the job. So of course I said, yes, I'd become a people leader, or I need to make more money. And that's the path to make more money. There's a number of different reasons we can fall into people leadership roles, and it's not what we really want to do. So really explore, what does a people leadership role look like at your organization? Think about, does this align with what I want, the type of work I want to do? Am I motivated to, instead of being that, star player, to teach others how to become the star player and essentially give away that power of driving the results and drive results through others? It's 100% okay if the answer is, that's not for me. In great organizations, there are places for individual contributor high performers and places for people leader high performers. And usually through some work, you can find that role that fits you best.
What if you do some of the work and you are already a leader and you realize this company is not aligned with my leadership style or who I am as a professional? Have you encountered any situations like that with some of your clients, or maybe even personally, and there's a need to work through that? Like, have you encountered that, and what does it look like?
Certainly, because company cultures, they're dynamic, right? They change with senior leadership. They change even with your own leader. I've been in phenomenal company cultures where my direct leader has a culture that's toxic, and we'll probably all experience that in our life. So I think the first thing you have to ask yourself is this breaching some sort of moral or ethical standard? The next question is, what are really the drivers creating the unhealthy culture or workplace? And can they be improved? Sometimes you look at it and you go, hey, this is like a top-down mandate. This is how people leaders are expected to lead. It's probably not going to change. And so you're at a decision point. Is this something I can live with that's healthy and productive for me? If not, then you got to do what's right for you. Other times we really dive in deep and we go, I don't really like some of these things, but I think they're temporary. The company's going through change. It's a brand new leader. And I'm going to give myself 90 days to really reevaluate. I think the most important thing is when you're trying to make your career moves, you can't be running from something. You have to run towards something. People make a lot of mistakes when they're just running from their last opportunity because they tend to fall into something that's not ideal. You gotta know what you're running towards, find it, and then take off.
That is so true. Like, so many people are just trying to escape a situation that they find themselves in, sometimes another situation that they really don't want to be in. And then it really gets depressing because you're like, why does this keep happening? Like, what is going on here?
Yep. One of the things that I encourage people to do is if you're contemplating a pivot, a switch, even quitting, let's be honest, know what the next job should look like for you. And what I mean by that is try to make it as objective as possible. So I'm talking about everything from what you want as far as the type of work that you do, the type of leader you want to work for, the type of hours you want to work, the work that you do, the company culture. Try to define the criteria that is going to create the environment where you can grow, be successful, and have work that is meaningful to you. And that looks different for all of us. And sometimes that's hardest because people don't want to admit what they really want. They want to write down what they should go do or what their family member thinks that where they shine in their career. No, you have to do what's true to you if you really want that happiness and fulfillment. So when you create those objective kind of criteria, then when those jobs pop up, you can go, how does this compare against what I said I wanted? When things are in conflict like that, you're like, okay, what's driving this? Is this in conflict because I just didn't entertain an opportunity like this, or I just never envisioned a job like this? Or is this in conflict because I want it to be the right job so bad, so I get out of here? And then, hey, you can still make the decision to get out of there and go take that job, but at least you know what you're stepping into.
That awareness piece is key. It's like it may not be ideal for you, it may be an escape, but as long as you know that and you're not
Right.
trying to fool yourself and condition yourself into thinking this is the next best thing, then it's fine. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. I get that. So you rose to leadership without a playbook like yours. How did you start to develop your own playbook so that you can have the impact that you were looking for, the credibility that you were looking for?
Well, without a doubt, I had a couple phenomenal leaders in my career and a couple mentors, of course, that I've kept along the way. So the first thing is when you're seeking out leaders and mentors for additional help, because a lot of the leaders that were really influential for me, I made asks over and above just manage me in the job. I said, hey, like, I really want to be good at this, or I really want to get to this next job. I need you to provide extra feedback. I want you to be, very critical and challenge me to get to that next level. It's exactly that, knowing what you need and asking for it. Nobody wants someone coming to them to be their mentor and being like, can you mentor me? Great. I'll set up time and tell me everything that you know. I mean, that's not beneficial, right? Leaders and mentors want to help people who can define, here are the things I want to work on, and here's why I think you're a great person to help me. And will you help me? And when you make those asks, you of course have to follow through, or else people aren't going to help you very long. So I definitely was not shy about asking for help. The other thing is that I am a perfectionist. So one of the things that's hard for me is, or was early on, was getting critical feedback, because I always thought to myself, I should have known that. I should have done that. And the truth is, there's always things that we do wrong. And I had to really flip the script on feedback for myself to say, feedback is my pathway to get to where I want to go. It's not the mirror that tells me what I did wrong. And when I was able to embrace feedback as really the roadmap to my future, then I started being really intentional about who I asked for feedback, how I ask for it, more greater frequency. So I knew the little things, and I would intentionally up my game every time I did that task. And so that helped me really accelerate my development. And then, you talk about credibility. I think part of that is that you have to jump in any situation. And if you are not, a subject matter expert in it, you got to be committed to learning first. There's nothing that's going to kill your credibility faster than you're brought into a meeting and you act like you know it all because you want to impress people. I mean, people see through that right away. Right. So sometimes it's just being committed to learning and reading the situation and understanding what value you bring in that meeting. And then when you step up and make those comments and contribute, it's based in a knowledge and a credibility that people listen. And there's no, I think, playbook that works for everybody. I think the question you have to ask yourself is the strategy I use for success today going to serve me in the future? It's a critical question. I'll give you an example. When I was younger in my career, I always was a rock solid presenter, but I was willing to prepare, like to the point of nauseum. Most people wouldn't have done that. They wouldn't have done a dry run with their boss, and they wouldn't have said it to themselves in the mirror 10 times. But guess what? I got to a point in my career where I didn't have time for that. So I had to ask myself, how do I succeed in this job today with what's asked of me, with the time I have, with the skills that I have? And so I always think about that. My strategy for success today, is it going to serve me in this role, in this situation, with this client? And if not, you got to be versatile and adaptable. Otherwise, you're doing the work, but the results aren't what you want to see.
I never thought about the question of, will what I'm doing today in this way serve me in the future? I love that perspective. You said on LinkedIn that, and this was in a post, that the real growth happened for you when you chose authenticity over approval and you aligned your life with purpose, not pressure. I can resonate with that. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, well, it goes back to being underestimated. And I think when I was young in my career, I did the best that I could, but when you aren't comfortable having a seat at that table because maybe you look different, you have less experience, people have already vocalized that they're not sure if you're the right fit for the job, it's easy to conform to who other people in that room, how they are, how they show up, how they communicate. My first people leader role, you can see I'm a pretty outgoing, high energy person. I'm very intense. I'm actually, much more intense than I probably show up right now. And my leaders were very stoic, kind of even keeled people. And so I thought, I don't know if like I should be myself. Maybe I should be like them. And I can tell you, it felt very uncomfortable every day. Like, not being who I was at the core. And people noticed. People were like, "You seem so different. Like, are you stressed?" I'm thinking, I'm not different. I'm just trying to be successful. And so I'm trying to act like those people over there who've been incredibly successful. Right. And so I had to really learn from the experiences early on. I had to trust that I was hired in this job because they wanted me in this job. How I showed up in my last role, obviously with some additional skills I got to build, okay. But when I finally chose to just show up as me and trust that that was the pathway to success, I felt better. I was more confident. And guess what? I was more relatable because people knew what to expect. I showed up consistently, whether I was talking to my leader or my direct report or a peer. And people want to know you. They want to be able to trust when they come to you who you're going to be in that moment. And so it kind of goes back to aligning myself with my leadership principles. That's when I first started that exercise, was in a moment where I was called out for not being my authentic self, leading my team.
Wow. Being called out, that feels like something that will have you going home thinking about it.
Crying,
Maybe. Yeah.
thinking, all of those things. Yes, it will.
Yeah, exactly. So how has your idea of success evolved or changed over the years, and what does it sort of look like today?
My view of success has definitely evolved. I would say early in my career, it was about external validation. The sales award, the milestones, the praise I got, the recognition, because you're just not always mature enough to be able to value your own opinions. You lean on the things that everyone's gunning for. You're gonna I'm gonna be that because it proves my value, my worth. And I have learned that that is a very empty, never-ending race. And I'll tell you, I won the sales awards. So it's not like I'm here like I was always third place, so it's not worth doing. It's just you work so hard for this one moment, and the moment is gone in an instant. Your speech on the stage, accepting the award, is 30 seconds, but you gave everything. You placed all your value on that moment. And if it didn't happen, were you a failure? No. But you've told yourself that story. So I have shifted to really a deep sense of intrinsic validation. I know what my goals are. I know how I feel when I step into a meeting and I show up as myself in a hard situation. I go toe to toe with someone who's really challenging me. I deliver a result that I'm proud of. And so I really try to lean on the things that I know are critical to being a great leader, driving the right results, and also me being intact as a person, right? And not just being in it for the achievements. And I think part of that is driven by the fact that we evolve as people. I've had 2 kids. I have a marriage that I want to be really successful and at its best, as well as my career. And so there's no milestone for being a great mom. There's no end game that says, is my marriage what I want it to be? We have to learn how to be our own barometer of success. And that's what really matters, because the game of accolades, yes, it's important at some level, but it's not what's going to sustain us.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that has been something maybe that's been burning for you, or you're just like, oh, I wish we would have touched on that, something that maybe you want to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I think it's important that you always take an ownership mentality to your career, whether it's stepping into that next job, whether it's you really want to develop a certain set of skills or accelerate your growth, but your leader maybe doesn't have a focus on that. You have to have a belief that you're in the driver's seat. There's a way to do that, not to do it, right? You can't always push. There's timing, there's a lot of factors that play into it. And great leaders and mentors can help you through that, right? But sitting back and waiting for someone to tap you on the shoulder for the job, or waiting to create a development plan for you, you're probably going to be waiting for much longer than you'd like. So what can I control today? How can I invest in my own development? How can I take a proactive approach in building the career I want to have? And those with an ownership mentality will go much further faster than sitting back and waiting for someone to take you along for the ride.
Whitney, this has been a great conversation. Let our listeners know where they can stay in touch with you.
Yes, please visit my website at whitneyferris.com. You could subscribe and get messages and content from me on a regular basis. And also you can follow me on LinkedIn or on Instagram at Whitney_Ferris. So I hope to connect with some of you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Whitney, for spending time with us today. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
And thank you all for listening, for spending time with us. And I hope you were able to walk away with some very valuable tools that you can take with you to take action and do all the things that you need to do to be the best version of your career self, honey. As always, be well.